Hello viewers, good afternoon. Just a few days ago, the President of the Republic of Uganda had an interview with KTN News, which is a Kenyan-based media entity, therein where he addressed issues around transition, issues around Uganda's development, issues around the tweets made by General Muhoozi, among other things. Well, today we convened to have a conversation to explore that interview in detail, but also perhaps examine our relationship between Uganda and the Republic of Kenya, but also the broader picture of the East African community. Well, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished citizens to explore this conversation with you this afternoon. That is now my honor and privilege to introduce to you. And the first on the panel is Mr. Ochieno Joseph, a UPC ideologue and a media personality. Many thanks for joining us, Joseph.
It's always a pleasure to be here, yeah. Really.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Yes, next to Joseph is Dr. Sarah Bireete, who is a lawyer and also the executive director, of Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, many thanks for spending the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Moses, and the fellow viewers.
Yes, then the last panelist is Mr. Pollar Awich from the NRM Secretariat. Mr. Pollar, many thanks for retired major. Yeah. Titles are very important, I know.
Greetings, viewers, but if you dare mention Sarah's profession, why would you forget mine?
You're also a lawyer, a law.
Yes, a lawyer and a qualified advocate of the High Court, Superior and Subordinate Court. There.
Retired
Thank you for that addition, retired major counsel. Well, Mr. Chino, let me just start with you. The President, in responding to Uganda's development journey, emphasized and mentioned that in the 6 decades of Uganda's development, only 36 have in fact been progressive. The other 24 have been, in his own words, regressive. The 24 years therein, the UPC government account for around 10 years, around there.
12, in fact.
12, yeah. What do you make of that statement, that you presided over a regressive developing country for 12 years?
So, in other words, Mr. Museveni put us on the spot. You know, it's extraordinary, actually. And it is the case for this reason, that as we convene to discuss a subject that would have possibly been hesitant, that perhaps we were giving him too much credit, I would have wanted to object that we shouldn't discuss it. But considering the regional implications, and considering the fact that some of the related subjects, includes a treat from his son, who's actually the 3rd general in his family, and who had almost clearly threatened to march into Kenya within a short period of time. And something that gave Mr. Museveni an opportunity, for the first time possibly, I can know maybe Mr. Awich can correct me on this, to come out to publicly apologize. It was extraordinary, but of course
For his adult son.
For his adult big son, and above all, he also says that he had to go to the treat, meaning to social media. It's extraordinary. But that then takes me back to maybe the power of media today, the power of social media, its pros and cons, because when I think I was last on this particular program, I know we're discussing Kenya, and partly because of social media and the way things are presented, I had picked something from Kenyan media, which gave an indication about Kenyan elections, which we were trying to discuss, about personalities and names that appear like members of the new Ruto cabinet. And this thing had done the rounds in Kenya, propaganda, turned out to be not particularly true. So in a way, it's a point I have to make, that this thing had been doing the rounds there, but Kenyans were battling, continuing to battle on the media space. We picked it, I picked it, and presented. I think I was actually sitting here and presented it as such. And it happens to be, it was not necessarily factual, but related names. But this links to the politics of perception, where a treat of a military general comes out, presents as that, and then what do Kenyans say, what do Ugandans say? Likewise, Mr. Museveni talks about the questions that we talk about 24 years of a regressive time. And Mr. Museveni presents himself as the man who's brought this country together. And yet Mr. Museveni is the man in whose family there are 3 generals. But from where in Luwero, I don't know whether there's a single general that has emerged out of Luwero, the traditional area where they came to war. So maybe that partly qualifies to you that. No, I think the period leading to NRA is the period where there was unity in this country. It was a period where there's a genuine attempt to build structures and institutions that functioned and worked, notwithstanding the challenges particularly that happened in 41. And I'll try and talk about the period within the confines of UPC 41 and 42, minus Amin, but to an extent, in a very specific way. It's extremely unfortunate for Museveni, an old man who looks very old and tired, but also trying to talk in a very wise way. At this stage, he should be taking responsibility. He should be calming down the nation. He should be calming down the region. And he should be telling Kenyans that, you know, I did this and maybe made these mistakes, but this is where we are. You young girls, as we call it, presenters, you know, these are lessons you should be able to learn. We want to leave this country, we want to leave this region safe and better for you. But he said he went grandstanding, number one. But number two, it was very interesting. Mr. Museveni is quite clearly not an intellectual. I challenge people continuously. He's not. You realize that the first question, he goes to take a diversionary position. You know, what are the key milestones? He talks about period of regression. Quite clear, this is the time when this country had the biggest hospital building project in history. You know, if you take it to current per capita terms, that's about 150 or thereabout hospitals in a period of 8 years. You know, expanding infrastructure, both transport infrastructure, agricultural infrastructure, education infrastructure, health infrastructure. Maybe if it was a time like this, you know, social media would be something accessible from Kidepo down to Katuna. You know, that was the period that Museveni calls a regressive period. You look at Uganda today, no rail network, you know, no public transport systems, you know, banks collapse, you know, agricultural systems collapse. I came from the end of the other world the other day, and you see animals dying and falling off because of cattle dips. It's extraordinary that Mr. Museveni would say that, well, 36 years has been the period of progress. But also, quickly, minus Amin, Obote 2, the war that happened, is also the first time when we saw a fast rise in standard of living of the people in this country. And yet that's the time when Museveni was in the bush fighting. But guess what? In Museveni's government, of the 36 years, you know, 20 years, northern Uganda people live in concentration camps. What nonsense can somebody talk about and call it stability? You know, and people know, you know, we want to forget these things and move on. As Ugandans recognize these things happen and went wrong. We need to move on with it. Mr. Museveni, as an older man, you know, needs to play better than his son, whom he was trying to massage Kenya on his behalf and say that I'm the elder, I'm a man of wisdom. And so on the question then of his son, talks very interestingly. He's a good guy, he's a good soldier, perfect soldier, you know, except he's just a bit cheeky on Twitter. You know, so, you know, if somebody's bad 5, 10%, 20%, as they say, you know, the other 80 is fine. Okay, granted. What are the 80% excellence of Mr. Muhoozi? You know, which battles? The battles of the heart of Konyi in the Garamba? Is that the battle? Neither here nor there. But that's not the issue. Where we're today, I have no personal issues with the young guy. In fact, I've rarely commented about him. But which other general, which other soldier, which other army officer, perhaps some major, would say and do what Muhoozi did and get away with it? He wouldn't.
Yeah, good question, and perhaps we shall explore that with retired Major. But before Major, come to you, Doctor, the question of transition. Honorable Norbert Mao has in the past, I think at any public forum that he gets, he emphasizes that their MOU with NRM was hinged on discussing a transition post-Museveni. The President in his interview, I don't want to say dismissed, but rather he was very, his response was not very clear. He simply said that the NRM works in a way that we welcome everyone, we are a broad-based party, and therefore Norbert Mao joining us was NRM trying to, you know, incorporate each and everyone else. But he said that they did not categorically discuss the issue of transition. Does this come as a surprise to us? That transition was never part of that MOU.
Yeah, but I first want to have a take on people who regard Uganda as a country that started in 1986. I think we need to get over that kind of arrogancy. Let me just compare NRM's now new project, the parish development model. If we had not killed, if NRM had not presided over the death of cooperatives in Uganda, there would be no need for things like gambling, like with things like parish development model, where I think already we have about 30 people arrested for corruption in the parish development model, countrywide. We are sending little money. First of all, we do not have money to roll it out. But even the little that is reaching the sub-counties, the districts, the parishes has been embezzled to the extent that now government has shifted to direct sending to the beneficiaries in circles. So given the impunity and corruption in NRM, it does not matter the idea, it does not matter how beautiful it is, it will simply not succeed because of moral degeneration, because of thuggery, and because of impunity. It's just a matter of filling prisons now with which district has stolen parish development model. Next you will start arresting circle leaders because to the mindset of the people. People know that NRM always gives free money, either towards elections or after elections. You can go to the previous cycle, emyoga, whatever gambling, bonabagagaware, change, you know, it's just a matter of change of name. And it is the same thinking. Intention may be good, but capacity to implement, zero. Youth livelihood programs, 75% defaulting. You can go to any other attempt to develop a country through handouts. It has failed, flat down. In the 36 years, the cooperative movement under the 24 years, effective on improving household incomes. Anybody who thinks otherwise should table evidence. How the death of cooperatives happened? It was a political move. In my district where I come from, it was clearly stated that they wanted to kill Banyankore Kwete and not to uproot UPC roots. It was in the open. So when you say that, and consistently, NRM people take to the podium and say that as if there was no Uganda until NRM happened. And if we do not demystify such kind of hypocrisy, then it means that after NRM, the other group might also attempt to say there was no Uganda until we arrived. I think we should account for our country, including the pre-colonial era, colonial era, post-colonial. We should stop being dismissive of other people that have made a contribution, good or bad, in this country. Because after all, there is no perfect person, and NRM has its right side of bad deeds in this country. Away from that, we could venture into transition. I never believed whatever my good friend, Honorable Norbert Mao, thought he had achieved with NRM. Right before NRM took power, they set a legacy that they can never genuinely engage in dialogue through the Nairobi peace talks. As children, we know that people kept referring to them as Nairobi peace jokes, and indeed they were peace jokes. The people would sit and negotiate one thing, and then tomorrow you hear NRM has entered Kampala. So they were negotiating to buy time and negotiating as a strategy to weak the enemy, the people they regarded as an enemy. So has that changed? We can go to the rebellions that have happened in this country, including ADF, Itongwa, Lakwena, and the Roads Resistance, among others. Has there been any genuine negotiation? Museveni believes in crushing the enemy. He either buys you, you join him, or he crushes you. That is his political philosophy. When the negotiations with LRA started, which Mao bases on as a strength.
Interesting, yes.
Yeah, many people, of course, were dismissive, but the people of northern Uganda wanted peace. The people that Norbert Mao represented then wanted peace, and they were tired.
And if you don't mind, just briefly, Sarah, and by the way, that's another misnomer. The peace talks in northern Uganda, I was a party to this. Most of the people in Uganda wanted peace. By the beginning of peace talks, for me as a campaigner for 30 years, we had started feeling the rest of the country that had thought the North was the other, genuinely saying, let's find a settlement to the question of northern Uganda. In fact, what the Maos picked, and Norbert, this is official, the programs that people like us were working behind the scenes to push Museveni and push Museveni's friends, that look, this thing cannot be resolved militarily, you know. What is there is a people. there must be a settlement. So officially that must be there. To credit that it ended there, but to people, some people to pick and choose is not necessarily true.
Thank you, but yes, and that's a good addition. But the Northern Uganda MPs, led by Honorable Mao and Reagan Okumu, were aggressively advocating for peaceful settlement. But there was an external force that we always conveniently, cover under the blanket. The UN was moving to declare Uganda, Northern Uganda, a disaster area. They sent President Chisano. I was then working on a project to do with peace in the Great Lakes region. They sent President Chisano for a fact-finding mission to report back and finalize a declaration of Northern Uganda as a disaster area. So when President Chisano came, the government people woke up and said, look, if we have this Northern Uganda declared and taken over under UN, then it will be a different ballgame altogether. So that's when they joined now, embraced the call and said those who want to go, led by Ndugu Lugunda. Ndugu Lugunda went. There were civil society organizations involved. One of the conditions Konye had put was that when he asked for satellite communication, he said he did not want it by government, and I know that it was procured by non-government actors that I might not mention on this group through and given to Lugunda but by non-government actors. So it was a collective effort of so many people, but the MPs really championed the process sort of together with other people. So when you look at the credentials of President Museveni as far as the negotiation is concerned, just look at the first 4 years of NRM. When they came and said we shall rule for 4 years, put a constitution, do it and hand over power to the civilians. We are not interested in this power. That was the first lie that NRA told the people. So the 4 years, the people believed them, the Kawanga Semogere, they believed them.
They believed them, yeah,
The Ziritwaura believed them, and they had joined the broad-based movement. And when the extension came, that's when the first fallout in NRC by Ziritwaura. So the Kawanga Semogere thought they could still achieve something in terms of national consensus. Yes, but when they realized the pretense and the hypocrisy, they all kept on. It was a matter of time for people to fall off, including a time when it came for the likes of Dr. Besigye, the first NRM National Political Commissar, to fall off after realizing the hypocrisy and pretense and the intention of President Museveni, personally, keeping power.
To use the word that
yes, regardless of it's for him, he dupes you so long as you help him reach the 2 kilometers. Whether you fall off or not, he will find another person to dupe.
So are you saying that the Honorable Norbert Mao was duped on the transition question?
But isn't it obvious? Is that a matter of question, or you are affirming the obvious? There are some
in your opinion, because
I am saying that if President Museveni even duped the people who made the constitution. If you listen to Dr. Matembe's testimony, they had wanted to entrench term limits. But because the President Museveni knew that he cannot work according to the term limit standard, said, no, that one, there is no need, you can even tamper with it. There is no need. Don't entrench it. Otherwise, according to them, the legal committee of the Constituent Assembly, term limits would have been entrenched under Article 260 of the Constitution, making its amendment a decision of majority Ugandans, not just a few that you can buy with 5 million like he did. So even them were duped. So for him, if he needs to cross this river, it's a matter of who is in his space to dupe, and he reaches the next roadblock. Then the end will justify the means. That's how I can define his leadership.
Wow. Retired Major, just as we get back to the interview that President Museveni had, on the question of his son, General Muhoozi, the tweets that he made referring that, in fact, his army would capture Kenya in 2 weeks, and then the president coming out to apologize on his behalf, one. But two, he later on receives a promotion in the army ranks. As a former serving officer, does this make, I don't know, what do you make of this? Is there a preferred treatment given to...
What I make of it is that the commander-in-chief acted within his prerogative and within his discretion and constitutional mandate. On the issue of the tweets of General Muhoozi, he himself came forward about it, and I've always linked it to this explanation that you are aware about Ekanya, the cartoonist. Ekanya went to a bar and told people that, ladies and gentlemen, when I drink, everybody should drink. And people drank and drank and drank. And then later on he said, ladies and gentlemen, when I pay, everybody should pay. The people said, no, you told us to drink. But then Ekanya said, if you could give due weight to my first part of the statement and act on it, why don't you give due weight to the second statement? Why do you selectively use the statement? So General Muhoozi said he could capture Nairobi in 2 weeks. People gave due weight. He later on came up and said, I was joking. People don't want to give due weight. Why don't you give due weight to both statements? Now, between me and you, and even in your family, or even with your spouses, you can make a joke. But sometimes you come to realize that the joke was not well placed. And it hurts. So when such a joke hurts, is when, because it involved two nations, two sovereign nations, that is when the commander-in-chief came to apologize. These jokes, which often go overboard, happens in day-to-day life with your spouse, with your brother, with your sisters, with your friends. You tend to think you're making a joke,
not senior,
and then
not senior military officers, let alone senior government officials.
No, it happens. We live in a society. So when it happens, that is when...
And you're becoming too simplistic, Afande.
No, but this is real. Didn't he say he was joking? It wasn't there an apology? So these are things which happen in day-to-day.
Perhaps what they're asking is that certain issues cannot just be joked about. The sovereignty of...
That is why... That is why the commander-in-chief had to apologize. Because he said, look, General, you made a joke, but this joke was over and above. Or it was not a good joke. But it doesn't remove the fact that it was a joke.
You recall that Idi Amin actually made a joke about capturing Kidega at first.
No, about Nyerere?
Yes.
And the proposal to marry him.
Yes.
Do you remember that joke?
Yes.
Who told
was it a joke?
Who told you it was a joke?
So was it a little gay when he proposed to Nyerere?
Who told you it was a joke? This one, the author said it was a joke. You need to get to the author. Suppose you ask the author and he says, I was damn serious.
Was it Amin serious?
Who are we to judge Amin's words? Other than here, we are judging Moses' words by his own words. I mean, he can show an affidavit to that because it is his own saying.
What if, retired major, the apology, the apology, but also him retracting the statement came some days after. What if in between there, the people had taken it very seriously and had responded? Where could the country have been today? Yes, he apologized.
Tororo would have been taken, and I'm from Tororo.
You know, because he did retract it, but after some time. So how do we account for the time in between?
Okay, you are saying you are saying what if? You are talking of a hypothesis. Your guess is as good as mine. You are saying what if it had been taken seriously? Your guess is as good as mine. Who am I to project what could have happened? But it didn't happen. Because precisely anybody could see that this was a joke. because it is not possible to walk inside a sovereign country for within 2 weeks. Not even the superpower of Russia could walk in Ukraine like that. So when you make a statement which points to impossibility, isn't it enough to be judged as a joke? Despite the fact, or on top of the fact that the author said it was a joke. So this was a joke. So you don't give due weight selectively to statements. You give due weight to the first part, and you don't give due weight to the second part. Precisely, that is it.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to believe Afanda Awich. And in the same vein, I'm looking at the effect President then Idi Amin's statement had on our East African region. He threatened to capture Kenya. He threatened to overrun Tanzania and proposed to marry Mwalimu Nyerere. Was he joking? And should he have been believed? And of course, from that time, that's when Tanzania realized that actually there is a bigger problem in Uganda. And there's a serious issue they needed to solve. And that's part of the effort they mobilized to overthrow Idi Amin. So could Idi Amin have been joking? Did Tanzania overreact?
No, but remember that Amin was the first to attack Tanzania, meaning that he was not joking. What eventually turned that into an international hostility between Tanzania and Uganda was to the effect that Amin attacked and actually captured the territory in Tanzania.
So what first appeared as a joke, he put it in
action. It's you who is saying it is a joke. I wonder why you're treating Amin as a joke. Why I'm treating Mose as a joke is because he said it is a joke.
Or because he's a joke.
No, he said it is a joke. His own diction is that. Why do you want to judge Amin to have been joking when he did not say he was joking? I am saying Mose was joking because Moses said he was joking.
Okay,
Moses,
fair enough. Oh, okay.
I know you're coming to me, and I'll help you. I'll help on this. I'm actually very disappointed. My brother, Awich, you need to help this panel, and I think we need to help this piece. You are the voices of reason in NRM. You need to help moderate it. You're someone who joined these services, as I understand this, as a Kadogo and Sub, and you did well, considering where you were. You should really be the voice of reason, whom I believe people like Moses should hear. Moses, Uganda was invaded by Tanzania in 1972. Amin invaded Tanzania later. Tanzania, backed by Ugandan forces, some of whom were my relatives, came and overthrew Idi Amin. These days, Museveni presents himself as the expert on that. There's been a considered attempts and threats to invade Kenya. Including Museveni tried in 1987, by the way. So
yes, under Moi. Actually, we hit some kilometers in Kenya.
Threatened to attack Kenya. So for something that is serving Ugandan general comes up on modern social media, Twitter, and issues a statement.
Under his official handle, with his title.
You know, elections had taken place in Kenya where there had been disputes and issues, some of which made references to relations between Kenya and Uganda, including suggestions that there may be elements of Ugandan security involved, you know, allegations. But all these things are there. And then you raise them and we call them a joke. It's extraordinary. Now, beyond that, Uganda has actually invaded Rwanda. Uganda invaded Rwanda and occupied it for a long time, meaning the Musevenis and RPF. Uganda invaded Congo twice.
We are paying.
And we are now paying. Uganda invaded Sudan. So this region, which the context, the other element, and we are sorry taking a bit of your time in the first phase of the conversation.
No, it's okay.
The context of East African relations and integration. This East Africa that I was looking at, Milton Obote, Julius Nyerere, and Kenneth Kaunda the other day, fantastic, handsome, young guys who are looking forward to this continent, you know, and I'm wondering where they've gone, you know, and where the possibilities that you guys, by the you guys and this young who speaks, you know, you guys, this East Africa is a big space that needs to be sorted out and led. And we hope that people like yourselves are able to do that. You know, so to create a situation in which a highly educated and, as I understand, highly trained general from this republic to do that, and to an attempt to be made to fight it, even Museveni comes out and apologizes, is extraordinary. So I was actually genuinely quite excited, quite worried that it is said like that, and you don't understand the nuances. So Kenyans took this very, very seriously.
And rightly so.
And rightly so. You know, including the fact that in this region, the baddest boy is Uganda at invasion and causing terror. So you don't know when next, whatever the underlying thing is happening. So it's a serious thing.
You see, you can't, if somebody makes a statement, for you to judge joking or not,
why is the father apologizing for a joke?
You can't measure by any machine or any standard whether it is the jokometer was serious or the jokogram was serious. You can only measure such a statement by the author's own words, because you can't go into his mutima, in his heart, in his consciousness. Now, it is him, if it was a matter of law, to swear an affidavit that I was joking. It is him to depend on it. And he has depended on it by saying, gentlemen, fellow citizens, I was joking.
Okay.
So who are we to take more than what he has said?
Just the last take on that.
Yeah.
I want to really to believe Awich, although I'm struggling with his submissions. But I'm wondering, the father in the KTN interview says, I had to go back to go on Twitter myself.
Yes, yes.
So why is it, and for us who are parents, we know that a parent understands better than any other person their children. Why is it that the father missed the point on a joke and threw his weight as our fountain of honor to apologize? Actually has apologized 3 times. Apologize on Twitter, apologize in writing, official letter, and apologize in the KTN interview, but also further clarify that Mhozi should stay away with state affairs on his Twitter. He should stay away from state affairs, from Ugandan politics, and interstate relations. Why is it that the father is failing to understand the joke?
I have already answered that one in a way that I have said, even in our interpersonal relations between spouses, children, you know, brothers and sisters, we make jokes. And when you make such a joke with intention of joking, the outcome is that it appears outside the context. That is when it warrants apology. I'm sure yourself, you have ever made a joke and you said, no, I was joking, I withdraw. It happens every day.
Oh yeah,
and that is why when the president, when he himself realized it was a joke over and above, he also felt the guilt. That's why he said he was joking. But the father also realized that the joke was misplaced. That's why the apology came. It happens, ladies and gentlemen, among us every day in our day-to-day life. That you joke with your brother and you realize, no, brother, forgive me.
We
I was
understand
joking.
you.
I'm sorry.
We understand you. We don't really want this thing to consume a lot of time. But let me just tell you this. As the Director of External Relations for NRM, you're a diplomat. I'm a diplomat, and I've been a serving diplomat within my political party and organizations, at which what you're saying simply does not apply. However, I would just want to say, we respect your opinion, and I'm trying to say that we understand why you're struggling. You know,
I'm not struggling. I'm speaking. Actually, I'm speaking with such ease that Sarah said I was being simplistic. Somebody who is speaking with ease, and Sarah saying, "How do you say I'm struggling?" I spoke with such ease.
As we wrap up the issue of the tweets, perhaps as someone who has served in the forces before, if a serving military officer had done what General Mhozi had done, what would have been the constitutional and legal remedy that should have been applied to that serving officer? Because in this case we saw a promotion and we saw an apology. What would have been the right, not right, but the constitutional approach? The legal
Controversial.
You see, the actions or the omissions of serving army officers are guided by the law.
Yes.
They are service offenses. So when your actions as a serving officer or your missions is seen, the state, in this case, is the complainant. There's a prosecution department in the army. I think right now it's headed by some colonel called Wandera. So the prosecution department always raises a case against you. Now remember, just like at the national level, the prosecution, the DPP, has the prerogative to drop a charge or even prefer a charge at any time. Okay? So such omissions or actions or inactions, it's at the discretion of the prosecution. Now they will weigh your actions or your omissions vis-a-vis the perceived ingredients of an offense that is perceived to be. So, one, it is at the discretion of the prosecution to prefer a charge in the relevant court. There are many layers of courts in the army, from a unit court to a brigade court martial, a battalion, a brigade court martial division, and what and all that, and so forth. Until, actually, for your information that you ask, the highest military court is headed by a civilian. That is called court martial appeal court. People seem to think the other court martial, where General Tumine and Guti were head, is the highest court. No, the highest military court is a court headed by a civilian. That is a court martial appeal. So, if it had happened to General X or General W or General Z, it is upon the prosecution to prefer a charge.
All right.
And even drop a charge.
Assuming you're the...
That is if the actions or the inactions merited the ingredients of a particular offense.
Assuming you were the prosecuting officer of the military, does the general's actions warrant any charges?
I need to check through the laws.
All right, fair enough.
I need to check through the laws.
Okay, Mr. Joseph, let me just come to you. On the issue of term limits, the president was very clear. He said that the amendment or the removal of term limits was a decision of Ugandans, and that it was the consensus of Ugandans that they thought that at time T, perhaps term limits are not so important to us right now, but what is important is, the country moving forward. What do you make of that?
No, I think Sarah partly answered that question, Charlie. And it's a question that, interestingly, Sarah, I don't think most citizens actually understand it as presented. That most of what NRA did really over the years has actually been defied. But when it comes to this very particular, it's very interesting, the observation that Museveni made. And that was to say that, look, we put it there for a purpose, almost as Sarah said. But what I know, and it's a fact, was term limits and age limits, in fact, although they're desirable, at the time the drive, and I've said it on this program variously, the drive at the time was for targeting Obote.
Age limit, but not term limit.
Age limit.
Yeah, term limit were put there genuinely, and they were popular. They were popular.
Both of them could have been.
Yeah. No, I'm coming to just as information.
Yes.
Term limits were genuinely demanded for by the citizens in the Awich Commission.
Okay, you're fine.
Age limit is a maneuver that was put to block Dr. Bote in case he came back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as it happened, Obote had no intentions of coming back to govern. And I've had conversations with some people in NRM, includes some interesting names. And actually found it very funny that actually they didn't know. And fair enough, even some people knew but they didn't know. And I've also said it, and maybe let me use the space again. There's actually Obote, ironically, for the purpose of East Africa, and for the purpose of yourselves as youth actually building for the future here, that it's Obote actually in the mid-70s during a lunch, a dinner, but I think it's lunch, with Nyerere and Mama Mir, I think was there, who suggested to Nyerere that we should actually retire when we're still popular. So ironically, Obote was in exile. That would have been possible about 74, 75, I understand. And Nyerere went on to retire quite aptly. Point is this, except for Obote's second term, if Obote had not been overthrown in 1971, it's unlikely that he was going to be one of those Africans who are going to go on and on. In 1985, Obote was actually going to win. He was going to go to 1990, but it was not his intention to go further on and on, regardless of the popularity. So I'm using that Obote element, but really to emphasize an important point to persuade us and the emerging leaders that these things are really not items to pocket to families and personalities and permanence. Blair said it that serving as prime minister, serving in this case as president, is such a privilege that really anybody who has an opportunity to have it, even if it was all for 12 months, to serve your country, to serve your people, should really by and large be done with humility, responsibility and respect, and space to let others also have a bit of opportunity. So whatever the case, I really hope that Mr. Awich and others will be able to persuade ourselves as citizens that State House, there is only one State House over 50 million citizenry, and that every citizen of Uganda, particularly the way UPC built it and found it this way, that we should be able to have the opportunity for all of us to have possibilities and to give hope, particularly to the young guys, that we can also come from rural Mukura or indeed rural Chinoni and have a possibility of reaching the highest office.
The hustler, the hustler phenomenon.
The hustler, father, no comment if you go next door. But so these are the things. But as a culture, maybe we discuss in Kenya that if only Kenya could help us with some of these exemplary things, then you can see the nicer part of it when it happens, how sweet we feel from here and wish so well. So in our way, it's possible. The box is still with Mr. Museveni, but I think on the basis of the interview, it is shocking. The guy is not moving anywhere. The guy is actually quite stuck, and the guy is quite regressive in his thinking, which in wisdom it should be. And a quick point I want to say, Ted Heath, Sarah, Ted Heath is the prime minister who gave us Idi Amin, and so I had every reason to sort of detest him. So I found myself in exile when this guy chased me. And you know, Ted Heath was now a retired man and he became the father of the house, the longest serving member of parliament. Ted Heath, a conservative, towards the end of his last 5 years, was the most sensible parliamentarian, and he used to vote almost with the Labour Party and would tell others because it's progressive left. So, you know, we used to this and we said that, oh, in the 60s we did it, and my cabinet told him, and my chancellor told me this thing, and I didn't believe him. No, they were right. That is what leadership is, and that's what wisdom is for leaders. So Mr. Museveni has got a crucial job to do in this country, a crucial job to do in this country, in this region. But the job that he did on that interview, to me, I think it was actually a disaster.
Okay. Fair enough. Doctor, let me come to you. The president, in trying to compare Uganda and Kenya, said that in Uganda, even a fool can survive. You know, that you simply need to go to your uncle's house and pick cassava and whatever it is and eat. Perhaps we could be getting that statement prima facie on the surface of it. Perhaps what he indeed meant was that in Uganda, we are in fact blessed with, you know, so much resources, and we have all these agricultural foods and all these commodities, and that, I mean, you cannot lack to find what to eat. What do you make of that statement?
You know, it's not a good statement. First of all, to regard your people as lazy. There's a saying that people get the leadership they deserve. So it vindicates the leader as well. If the people are lazy and they keep choosing you, like President Museveni says, he keeps winning majority. So the majority lazy keep electing an equally lazy leader. Because the people get the leadership they deserve. That's an English saying. So I think, to me, it is indicative of a failed leadership on his part, because if leadership cannot aspire people to be productive, then you have failed as a leader. It's like even us in our small organizations. If I say CCG staff are lazy, they are not capable of anything, then why do I exist as their leader? And what am I aspiring them to do? So that's how terrible that statement is. Two, it dehumanizes Ugandans. Yeah. I think President Museveni needs to remember always that Ugandans pick his bills. He is the single most person that has lived on taxpayers' privilege for the longest in this country. 36 years, he does not earn a living except from Ugandans. So how come they've sustained him? And his budget, 668 billion in a year. And he has already asked for supplementary budgets.
But doctor,
now I'm coming.
Who do you expect to fund the president?
No, wait. But how come the Lise leaders are supporting his luxurious life of 1.8 billion per day?
He has spent the last 36 years committing his life to
for lazy people
of Uganda.
For lazy people who pick his bills, his extravagant bills. I'm coming. President Museveni's budget, State House budget, is 668 billion. If you divide that budget by 365 days, he spends approximately 1.8 billion per day from lazy Ugandans. Does that sound like lazy people? Or it's disadvantaged people with an extravagant lead? He has already asked for supplementary. Every quarter, whenever there is a supplementary budget, just check. There will be State House. In addition to 668 billion, taxpayers' money, the people he vulgarizes as lazy. I do not agree with that statement.
Major, I don't think I need to ask you a question. Just the comments coming in. You know, the president referring to Ugandans the way he did, but also the issue of the legal framework as it stands today. Is it the consensus of 1995 still? Because he said that the issue of term limits was actually a decision of Ugandans. They thought that at time T, we don't need term limits anymore. But also the concerns coming in around his reference to Ugandans. What do you make of that?
The first one on the reference of the people of Uganda. The president has repeatedly said that the owners of Uganda are the people of Uganda. And that is crudely said, but legally framed. It is Article 1 of the Constitution which says power belongs to the people. Okay?
Why don't you cite it in full? It's a short article.
It's power belongs to the people. That is the
Who should exercise it?
And which does.
In accordance to the Constitution.
Which it does. Which the people do. There are two clear statements there that we need to make. Sometimes we read it on the surface. Power belongs to the people. But they said land belongs to the citizens. I am trying to differentiate these two statements because I want to emphasize the fact that the mandate belongs to the people. So it says, the Constitution says land belongs to the citizens. But the same Constitution says power belongs to the people. Those are two different statements. I'm just clearly putting it so that we know that we give the weight there too. Now, the president saying his comment about the people is actually about the love of the people. You see, even at a continental level, some people have argued that the hardship in the north, in Sweden, in Norway, in Finland, that because they are under hard natural circumstances, possibly it is what triggered them for existence purposes to work hard, and it has led to their development in technology because we get the challenge. So what the president actually referred is that we are blessed as a country, as you said it. We are an equator, we have the sunshine, we have the fresh water, we have the fish and the birds, the fruits. So like some people argue that the hardship vis-a-vis the abandonment of resources makes us lazy. So that is what is recounted. And because we are on the northern part of Lake Victoria, we are relatively blessed than other countries around Lake Victoria.
So is it a good thing?
Because if you look at our other friends, they kind of look semi-desert. This forest, fertile environment that we have is unique even in East Africa. So that is what the president meant. The abandonment of resources, that makes us, because if if we had such a scarcity, you'd probably go to your uncle that he referred to, and he would just open the door and say, "Who is that?" "That is Sarah. What do you want?" Because he knows the scarcity of resources. But because we have the abandonment, we don't care about it. Sarah can come, the sister can come, the cousin can come. I mean, we have the food. In fact, traditionally, we had food in granaries, and we had reserved food in the garden there, which is brought around June or July there. So this is what the president meant. He did not mean to belittle
Is it
Uganda.
a compliment?
It's a compliment. It's a compliment. It was referring to the abandonment of resources.
So meaning doctor is misrepeating.
She's trying to negative it for reasons best known to her. But otherwise, it is regarding country. Actually, the statement is more aligned to the abandonment of resources than the citizens. If you look at it that way, it is more implied to the availability
so
of
you're giving it satanic positivity.
The good nature of environment than the citizens. Your other question was about
his comments regarding term limits.
Yes, and again, that takes me back to Article 1. And the president, even in that interview, we said Uganda is owned, the owners of Uganda are the people. He said it in that interview. So here, if Uganda, the owners are the term limit, I mean, the owners are the people. So it is the people who have the power to decide anything. Suppose I feel I want a term limit, and Mr. Ochieno feels he doesn't want the term limit. What do? The Constitution provide for systems of resolving that, procedures, and that was duly followed. And if it wasn't duly followed, then there's an option of challenging it in court. Nobody did it. Or if they did it, it wasn't that successful. So I believe, or Sarah for that case, believes that we must have term limit. Mr. Ochieno says, no, we don't want term limit. In my opinion, we should let the people decide as and when they want. And then we said, now that Sarah says this, Ochieno says this, what do? The Constitution doesn't have a lacuna in that. The Constitution provides for resolutions of such situations. And it was resolved by the people. And here we are with the lifting of the term limit.
All right, fair enough. Just as a
you wanted Sarah says this, Ochieno says this, you wanted them to fight? No. There's a mechanism for resolving that, and it was duly followed.
No, but before we leave the debate on term limits, especially for the young viewers and followers of this program, I think it's important to remind people that the process was not that nice. Even people had to give the famous 5 million bribe through under tables at Mosa Court and all that happened. So it's not that people willingly. I think the difference with the lifting of term limits and the process of lifting age limit, the only difference is that during the lifting of age limit, the extremes of deploying the army to surround Parliament and beat up MPs who were opposed, it's the only difference. The rest of the process was the same.
And by the way, let me mention to the viewers that society is not static. Society is dynamic. And because the society is dynamic, the laws that govern societies are not cast in stone. The laws also change. When society changes, the laws change. So the laws are not hard and frozen. The laws are not written on stones. And not because the laws are changeable, but because the society changes. So the society change is in aspirations, in feelings, in desires. So once the desires change, automatically the legislative framework will change. So laws are not permanent.
Yeah, so the Constitution and the statute is a living document.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's take a short commercial break, but just stay with us because after break we shall begin with the comments regarding climate change that were made by the president, but also ECOP and other things therein. But most importantly, we shall explore the East African community in general. Just stay with us here after this short commercial break.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV.
Yes, hello viewers. We'll be back from that short commercial break and we shall just dive straight to the point. Mr. Ochieno, the president's comments in this interview regarding climate change and ECOP in general, he said that, if I may quote, he said that, Africa or Uganda in general contributes or emits less than 10% to the global emissions, the global carbon emissions, I mean. And that ECOP will continue as planned, with or without the support of the UN, of the EU and other, other states. What do you make of this? Should climate change take a secondary position vis-a-vis the country's development?
Climate change cannot take a secondary position. This nation is meaningless without its peoples. And as a country, we are meaningless today without you guys as the future. And the future of this continent will be nowhere when it is occupied by sand, excess rivers, excess sunshine, little food, with a few brains. That is why I will just take us back briefly to link to what Mr. Museveni himself said, and that the 24 years before him, Uganda regressed, and the 36 years Uganda's moved on. I'll put this context. In 1987, when I left my home in Agongera for exile, we had the swamps, we had the rivers, we had the trees, and the muvule trees at every almost home across the whole of eastern Uganda. All these have been cut, and they cut within about 15, 17 years. By my return, you can stand in Mukono and look through the other ordinary pane going to Lugazi. Environmental destruction under this regime. You know a Miss Mabira, whom possibly now is smiling at my brother Norbert when we're discussing about the deforestation of Mabira, environmental issues. So it's very easy for us, once we talk about the environment, that we confine ourselves to the oil pipeline, whose own environmental impact assessment, I don't know how much that was done. And to the extent that it may have been done successfully, is one of those things that calls on leadership, Asara, that I think these are conversations that civil society organizations should have, and they should not be blackmailed. And civil society organizations and political parties should have these conversations, and particularly young people in this country, for whom the future is determined, to have these conversations about our environment in a manner in which they're not blackmailed, that you take a position about a project, whatever size, whatever it is, that if you say no, or if you question, then you're less patriotic. To the extent that in 1982, Ugandan primary school teachers could cross into Kenya, teach in secondary schools, and excel the performance in those schools. Now that is after 8 years of Obote government, and actually an indictment of an Amin regime of 9 years. That is even after Amin had impacted on the economy of this country, including quality of education and investment. But 1981-82, Ugandan teachers who would have been trained predominantly under Idi Amin, but part of the system that existed, they were to do so. What here I'm trying to talk about, the skills package. I wonder, where are contemporary engineers, where are contemporary environmentalists, where are civil servants, where are these men and women who think and plan strategically for our country away from politics? Those are some of my concerns. So then if that is the case, I totally agree with Mr. Museveni that if you put in the context of global polity in terms of our contribution to global emission, it is minute. But on these very same programs, it's absolutely our responsibility that now I cough slightly more often than ever. And part of the observation I got from my beautiful doctor friend of mine was the other day that actually Kampala is substantially polluted. And even that part of the issue, there's been suggestions, Sarah, that when we begin to look for places to reside in this congested Kampala, we should be farther away from the city. And from this dust. But why? It's because of lack of planning and infrastructure, lack of planning and the killing of infrastructure systems by this regime, whether it is in transport and communication and everything, but including in ordinary construction, including the fact that I went to a particular location of Kampala the other day, and there is a construction taking place, and you look at these families, being affected, and you see the dust and see the people don't understand all these. So in other words, even my NAS, that oil thing, whatever it brings, after all, allegedly Mr. Museveni is oil, we have big environmental issues to address in this country, and particularly the major cities, and particularly the major capital Kampala to address. But I think maybe his conversation should spark a debate about the consciousness of our youth in schools, in colleges, institutions, and the younger professionals like yourselves to have conversations about the possibilities of our environment, because climate change is a reality. And that's why when some of these guys now talk slightly louder today than they would have talked 20 years ago, even in their cases, some of them were actually climate change deniers anyway. So some of these conversations are not necessarily as political as in this case Mr. Museveni wants to say. But it's also very tempting to say that, look, who is this guy is to tell us that we can't mine our oil when they mined their oil the other day and they didn't care about us. Those are arguments and conversations to be able to be had. I don't know, unfortunately, how many of these issues were national tables, where political parties, and I don't know that leading to this, and Sarah may be familiar with this, I was away for a few years, when conversations were taking place, when they're planning the pipeline projects, that political parties have a conversation about these pipeline projects. Political parties meaning all political parties, national political parties. And here, I am not to see, I'm blaming Museveni less. I am saying that these are matters of national concern. And any political party leader, political parties worth of a name, we should take positions on these environmental issues. We should be doing so. So meaning that if there's a pipeline project, we should know this is the position of FDC, the position of NUP, this is the position of DP. In UPC's case, traditionally, we are the party of environment, and we would have to take a position and would have a conversation. But even on this stage, I don't even know whether anybody in the UPC necessarily had this kind of conversations. So it's important. But Mr. Museveni is pushing it in the manner in which he's trying to throttle the idea of the pipeline because they need the oil rather than the underlying issue of the environment. And when we do it like that and even politicize it, we forget about the relations with some of those partners. We forget that some of those partners have saved us some of our environments. Some of the current campaigners, I know one or two actually in the EU Parliament, who in the 90s were amongst the people advocating for debt relief for Africa at the time, because they're saying that we're burdened by debt, and when you get debt relief, instead of paying interest on debt, governments can then responsibly begin to invest in health and education. In Uganda's case, our debt was cut off, but instead it became a profit and a pocket for a few individuals, and we're back to the same old mess. That, in my opinion, is the context of this conversation.
Wow, thank you. Doctor, let me just come to you. President Museveni, on top of being Commander-in-Chief of Uganda, on top of being Fountain of Honor in Uganda, Head of State, has now been ordained a new title, Father of the Region, by His Excellency William Ruto. What does this new stature mean for our relationship, one with Kenya, but two in the region? Because if a president refers to our president as the father of the region, perhaps he has earned it over time. Perhaps the things, his contribution towards stabilizing the region, has earned him that title. So do you agree with William Ruto, President William Ruto, in his reference to our president as the father of the region?
She agrees.
Well, let me first respond on the Awich. You'll have your time. You like reminding us that you are disciplined. So, but it's of course it's good to be a bit having an interactive debate. So, on the environment, I think it's important to remind ourselves as Ugandans that in the previous 3 months or so, we have been having floods, killing people in Mbale, landslides in Kasese, rivers giving way, the bank bursts, river bank bursts, Kasese, areas of the Elgon region. And we've lost quite a number of people. But also due to prolonged drought, we have also lost a number of people. That is evidence of climate change. Climate change has nothing to do with Mzungu. Put it simply, I want to use very simple terms for everybody's understanding. Climate change has everything to do with prolonged drought in this country, because we are receiving little rain. Even now when it has been seemingly raining heavily, it's about to end. We are towards the end of the rainy season. And it's shorter than what we previously had as a hot and wet climate, equatorial climate. We no longer have that beautiful climate where it was possible to grow crops, the short-term crops 4 times a year. We no longer have that luxury unless you use irrigation methods. So we need to wake up and know that climate change is real. It concerns us. It has nothing to do with Mzungu. We are the ones dying. I know there are floods in the US and everywhere else in Europe, the wildfires, but we have our own share of floods, of drought, of landslides that are killing us. And we must deal with it. So to me, this reasoning of saying we produce fewer emissions or whatever, yes, but are you affected by climate change? And should you get concerned? To me, that is my point. We must get concerned. We must effect the climate adaptation methods. We must tame the climate and try to reverse it back to the equatorial hot and wet climate, plus planting the lost forest cover under President Museveni's regime and the degraded reclaimed wetlands. We must deal with those issues. They have nothing to do with Mzungu and Europe. We are losing wetlands. We are losing forests. We have lost 54% of forest cover under NRM regime.
But then how do we strike the balance, Doctor? Because we want development. We want to industrialize. We want factories put up. These factories won't be put up in space. They need land.
There is something called, I get your point, Moses. There is something called sustainably exploiting the environment. That means that you must take care of the sensitive areas, especially the sensitive catchment areas. You must balance the ecosystem. You must make sure the wetlands in Kampala are not drained. Mabira is transparent. Mabira rainforest that people study about in geography no longer exists. You can see through Mabira from the highway. People have cut trees. They have stolen that timber. They have degraded Mabira forest. We must get back on table and replant. Why are we losing Mabira? Does it have anything to do with development? Not at all. But people are smuggling timber up to Sudan. And even the taxpayer is not benefiting anything, but we are harvesting the harsh weather conditions in return. People building in wetlands. Every week you can see a wetland disappearing. Up to Namgongo where I stay. You leave a wetland, give it a month. People start with a washing bay. They modernize a washing bay and it has a drinking place.
But have you seen?
And then there's a petrol station. And before you know it, the whole area is reclaimed. Completely under the watch of NEMA, shamelessly. We have lost forest under the watch of the Forest Authority. I even want these institutions disbanded. They are useless.
And just a quick one, actually.
Just a comment, yes.
Yeah, just a quick one, actually. Interesting on the bill on what Sarah said before Comrade Awich comes in. Using my Sunday column, I actually talked about the charcoal business from the north, post-conflict area, under the watch of the, what's happening. In the last 3 weeks, Sarah, the last 1 week, 3 times I have had no power within a very close range to these studios for the whole day. No electricity. So it means people are using charcoal. It means people are burning charcoal. It means the Mabira that Sarah spoke about.
78% of Ugandans use firewood and charcoal. No, if you add charcoal 5.6%, it's 84% Ugandans who use firewood and charcoal. That means a tree is gone, forests are gone, as they use this biomass energy largely.
And we are selling energy to neighboring countries. They already experience what we're talking about. We've got solar technology, what is government doing, what's integrated and planning on these very particular issues, where's the thinking for it? In 37 years, and many of these things have happened directly, as I said, as a result of the incompetence of this regime. I was talking education much earlier. I actually don't know some of the geography that I studied in secondary school, you know, before Museveni came to power. Is one which some lecturers, PhD holders who are NRA, by the way, under this NRA regime, have no clue about, including the technocrats. And very likely, some of the guys who've gone ahead to study this oil thing, some of whom were specialists trained and picked to go and study these things. Those are some of the problems.
Okay, let me get back to my question. You want to ask me something?
Yes. No, Major, to also just have his
on the environment.
Okay. Can advance to
as Major comes in, I wanted to conclude with the concerns in the EAC project and the EU. I know that the Total and other agencies seeking to exploit our oil have done the environmental and social impact assessments. But this very environmental, if you read these reports, they are wanting in terms of protecting the sensitive ecosystem. And that's the question that EU Parliament raises. But also Ugandans had raised it before. So I don't want even to go to the EU. EU record concerns that local people had raised. Some of them had been resolved. A few of the concerns in the EU resolution had been resolved by the national agencies, but others are pending, and it's in our best interest to address them without even the interference of the EU.
All right, Major. Just
on the issue of environment, the president made that comment that you cited. When the president said that Uganda contributes little, this is actually a measurable quantity. It is a quantifiable amount. And the data is not from Uganda. The data is from other global agencies. In that, industrialized countries, USA particularly, they are the ones polluting the air. On the contrary,
they have over 9,000 registered oil and gas companies.
Yes, on the contrary, Uganda, even with the depleted forest, the green grass that we have, the leaves that we have, we are contributing more than them. So this is precisely what the president meant. The president was referring to a figure, to a data done by them to show the quantity that we contribute. But nevertheless, it's not to say the government is not mindful about environment. There's a whole ministry concerned. There are all the bodies, all the agencies concerned. All the legislations are in place. All the regulations are in place. The political will is there. Implementation is set on. Maybe challenges can be there. But this is a good will that the government is doing. Now, to go about the pipeline in particular, the impact assessment was made. And for it to have kicked off, there must have been acceptability of the impact assessment. Sarah says that there are other issues which were raised. We need to bring them on the table. But there was a thorough assessment done, and Uganda agrees that our environment is in our best interest.
And by the way, let's note that that report was approved by ISO, by the International Standard Organization.
It was.
Yeah.
It was approved. So there was no first step to have been done before the impact assessment. Now, I am surprised that European Parliament gets political, because our political actors have been demonstrating at the door of Parliament in Brussels.
Yes.
Demonstrating, do this. And of course, in their opinion, the political actors who are demonstrating, even if you remove NRM from power today, they would implement that pipeline without editing anything. So you can see that they are acting in bad faith. They're just saying, leave us State House, so that when we replace you in State House, we shall implement the same pipeline. This is dishonesty. And I was trying to imagine African Union, if it is sat in Addis and passed a resolution that the mining of gold in Westminster or something in UK, that the African Union is concerned and urges
them to stop.
to stop.
Why don't they do it?
Why don't they do it? Yes.
I think
Who
they will
stops
think.
them?
I think they will think what are these jokers talking about? But be as it is, they have said it.
Because of
They
your
have said it.
positioning, maybe. But
So they
why
have
don't
said
they
it.
do it?
But again, I have been a drafts person at international documents in Geneva. I looked at the draft of this instrument that they drafted in European Parliament. It is of no legal consequence. It is a persuasive document. It urges, it notes. There's nothing binding. So, but we take they take care of their concern, and we shall address it. But it is non-binding and should not give anybody sleepless night. Besides, the contract holder, Total, told them off. Total said, no, that's not possible. For us, we're in business. And I don't think France, with their brand agent of Total, France, in their heart of heart, in their seat in European Parliament, I don't think France supports such a move, such a motion. So that is it. So, environment, we are very mindful as a ruling party, and we give it in our manifesto, a clear provision in our manifesto as a ruling party, the manifesto which we marketed to the people, we take due note of environment. And when we win the election, we give the line ministry to implement that manifesto. So we are cognizant. Environment is for all of us.
So meaning the European Union resolution was influenced by
yes, by political actors from Uganda, whom I have said, I'm very sure if they came to power tomorrow, they would implement that oil pipeline without change. So this total dishonesty. We should, it's a matter of law that before any project takes place, environmental impact assessment must be made. It has been made.
Environmental and social.
And you have said it was even approved by other agencies. So there is no cause for alarm. We are mindful for environment, and we shall keep to it. And good enough, my colleague seems to say otherwise, but Total is a contracting agency, and Total could not even put a pen to paper without this agency, because they know it would impact on their contract.
You know,
it will be a nullity.
As a political leader and as a leader of Uganda People's Congress, the party of the people of this country, just for the clarity of the young viewers, Total is a profit-driven business, and to make a suggestion that's okay, Total has said it, so it would be okay for a governing political organization like NRM. That's extraordinary. Number one. Number two, to suggest that the European Parliament should not be a political... Parliaments are political institutions. Of course they are. And even to the extent that they make notes, of course they rule. And then part of the problem with you guys in NRA, anything you consider as a demonstration, any demonstration, you see it as enmity. I think part of what Sarah was trying to say. You know, it's about expressions of opinions. These are democratic processes. That's actually democracy, how democracies work. People will gather and assemble. Do you know, if this pipeline thing had happened, say in the UK that you're referring to, you know, 1/10 of it, it would possibly even cause the government to fall. Why? Because citizens are concerned. I said, anything that we do in political terms, it should be about citizens first. Do you know, West Nile the other day, I just woke up, Sarah, I didn't know that West Nile, up to this day, is not yet connected to the national grid.
You didn't know?
I didn't know. I've been to a Rowan Meadows. It didn't link to me. Moses, within 8 years of the first UPC government that Museveni dashes when he's swinging with his Kenyans, you know, we took the railway line from Soruti to Lira to Gulu to Pakwach and linked West Nile with Uganda. And rural electrification, Obote, in 1984, Obote told the Minister of Power and Telecommunications, Akena Pujo, he told him off that the 4-year program on rural electrification was not going quick enough for our people. These are environmental issues. So one of the things is at least light West Nile, light parts of Nagongera, light, Sarah was trying to talk to, I was talking to somebody, including in Ankole, without prejudice. This morning I was talking to somebody who was telling about some of the challenges of some rural places in Ankole, where apparently some people went to visit you guys because people think that you guys have everything. That we went to a particular village and there's no water, particular village there's no electricity, things like that.
As in piped water?
It has in piped water.
That one is...
You know, and then they're quite shocked about a particular squalid condition of certain families next to people who are living in hotel-style kind of posh places, some of these other ones, the funny. So there is a leadership crisis in this country. But when you begin to talk about planning, we're discussing environment, it is always very much about the big agenda, the planning and economic, the economic planning that embeds environmental issues as simply. It is common sense that up to this time, we have River Nile, and there is no power in West Nile. And we are talking about Museveni, and we're busy blaming Europeans and Saran, trying to say, these are common sense issues, and they're things which have got to deal with us, and they're going to hit with us, whether we like it or not. So the sooner Ugandans will start taking responsibility. When people raise issues, whether they're people from opposition parties, or indeed our friends elsewhere, we should say that, well, we not only take note, but let's review, many of these other things, rather than actually dismissing
But there
them.
is an hydro power dam on River Nile in the north, particularly meant for West Nile. And it has
West Nile is not connected on the national
but
grid.
there is.
I was
there
with the
is
Minister
an
of
hydro
Energy.
dam.
It is
Not
not,
Owen.
it's
Not
not
Owen dam.
complete.
It is already working.
Nyangak, it is not
it's for West
working. It
Nile.
is not commissioned. I was with the minister yesterday.
You
It
check
is
the
not
data.
commissioned. You have more data than the Minister of Energy. She says she has visited the Nyangak Dam 3 times.
Because Nyangak Dam is a power dam specifically meant for West Nile. And West Nile did not need to be connected
Shame
to
on your
Ginger.
37-year record. Shame.
And anyway, going back to the Kenyan question.
Yes, the new
Yes, I
stature,
think
father of the region.
ideally Uganda and Kenya would ordinarily enjoy good relations. We share a lot.
Yeah.
Kenya is our route to the sea. I know that DRC has come in the East African community, but Kenya is our main import route
And a
through
top trading
Mombasa.
partner, yes.
Kenya is a bigger economy, which has a bigger trade benefit with Ugandans. But we are also the same people. There are a lot of intermarriages. If you talk of families, mostly in the northern part of Uganda, they have relatives. First family relatives across the border. So we are one people. The politics, once in a while, tend to divide us. Even under the early days of NRM, we had our share of turbulent days with Moi, including a 6 kilometer. I remember NRA then entered Kenya 6 kilometers, and then Moi had to quickly ask for help and negotiations. But so NRM, in the first years of NRM, they attacked Kenya. I don't know what the conflict was about then, because the people who captured Kampala, like the language they use, most of them had enjoyed peaceful exile moments in Kenya, including working in Kenya while in exile. Most of these ministers, all professionals who were part of the external wing of NRM Bushwo, NRM Bushwo, were working in Kenya and protected by Moi. So I don't know what the disagreement was, but they attacked Kenya as a sovereign state. So we have had our turbulent moments. So when the Kenyans who recall that the same government in power had ever attempted, threatened, and indeed moved into Kenya.
They couldn't joke.
So they can't take such statements lightly, and they cannot be joking. That's not an area to joke with for any sensible adult. So when you come to the politics and the elections, there have been allegations of Ugandans influencing transition in Kenya, both at the time of Mwai Kibaki in 2002, where people said the UPDF had crossed into Kenya, and at this time when the people, Kenyans keep saying that the state operatives in Uganda had a hand in Kenya. I know that some of the senior state operatives from ISO and other areas were seen in Kenya at the time of elections. So we had 3 forms of delegations during Kenya elections. One was the overt operations, and people would bump into them here and there. Then we had the government agencies observer mission and the civil society observer missions. So the role allegedly played, the undesirable, the one of overt influence, does not augur well with Kenyans. So when you add insult on Twitter then there are already allegations that people are waiting to prove. And when you think that is something for adult, responsible people to joke with, you can provoke something you don't know. Because you remember when the demonstrations in Kenya, when they cut off the rail lines in Kidega and we could not get fuel here for 2 weeks. No goods could cross to Uganda. So you cannot, those are very sensitive matters that you do not expect an adult to joke with. It's like a child hitting a smartphone with a stone. So if people think that those are kind of games they should play in state matters, then that's the level of a child picking an iPhone 13 and a stone and they're playing.
Then
so,
the
the way we relate, but you know the impact it will have on the phone.
Yeah.
So the relations, you know, there is a hidden agenda being mooted at the East African level. We have had a protocol on good governance in the East African community. It has gathered dust since the early 2000s. And the reason it could not be passed, it has a provision for term limits. So when, after removal of term limits in Uganda, 2006, 2007, that protocol has remained in draft form because it's a condition in that protocol for the East African member states to have term limits.
Does Rwanda have term limits?
I think they have also removed them, but Uganda was the first. So that protocol could not be
but
passed.
But then Rwanda wasn't yet.
Yeah, it still had term limits. So the reason that protocol could not be passed in 2006, 7 and 8 was because of Uganda. I know Rwanda later removed, but we are the first to do away term limits. So there is a move being mooted that in that protocol, we remove, the East African removes the condition of term limits. It is alleged that in conversations with the Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, the condition for support was, will you support me to remove term limits at East African level? So one team said no, and another one said yes. So the issue that Ugandans, Kenyans, all members of the East Africa need to watch out for is the removal of term limits at the East African level being mooted by Uganda.
But, Doctor, these are very serious allegations.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm trying to attach them and quantify them, and they are very enormous.
No, it is true that the draft protocol exists and it has a condition for term limits. And the reason it has remained a draft is because Uganda removed term limits. That one is not hearsay.
So are you trying to say that there is a country X, or in this case Kenya, the president of Kenya wants term limits removed as a condition in the East African governance protocol?
No.
Yes, that's the implication.
The move I'm saying is the two main camps in Kenya were approached.
Approached by who?
On the discussion on whether to remove, that's the space you have to watch. On the discussion on whether to support a removal of term limits at the East African level to pave way for the political federation. Azimio said no. Kenya Kwanza said it is something they can look at. And that was a condition for support. So the issue that East African citizens need to watch out for, the new East African MPs that are yet to take office need to watch out for is the deteriorating democracy at the East African level with a wave to remove term limits in all East African countries.
Mr. Ochieno, let me come to you. Our president has a new stature, father of the region. Many think he has earned this over time because of his contribution towards security and maybe his contribution towards stability of the region. Has he earned this stature over time?
I know about a father of the nation. A father of the nation is ideally fast, democratically elected leader of a new nation. And thankfully in Uganda, I know some people in NRA, until 4 years ago, were trying to try and sell Museveni's side. Then they realized the father of the nation is not a negotiable position, and it's reserved for Milton Obote, just as the mother of the nation is a fantastic lady, Mama Miriam Kololo. You know, so unfortunately that position is not available here in Uganda. And I'm sure in the rest of other African countries, they already have those matters resolved. As far as East Africa is concerned, therefore, should follow that possibly in the likely event that there's an East African Federation, take into account very serious points Sarah is actually raising on the question of the democratic process and credentials linked to the East African new generation going forward. And that there is an East African Federation, and so therefore, who is the first leader? Technically, do you then go ahead and say Father of East Africa? But some of these titles then become really very funny. I'm one of those people who's supposed to be very like I got very liberated a long time ago, this thing about Your Excellency, Mr. President, or whatever kind of stuff, neither here nor there. And I think for us to begin throwing these things basically as maybe sweets for people who endorsed your possibility of maneuvering together so that you're able to get political positions going forward. I think it's quite disrespectful, and I don't even would want to be able to be there, because I think it's quite abusive to the people of this region who've really suffered substantially.
No, but
so,
Mr. Ochieno, aren't your assertions, in fact, counter East African Federation? Because if we are looking at federation, we are looking at integration, then we should aspire to have maybe one leader.
Oh, no, I have no objection. We have no objection. We simply say that, well, if East Africa federates, by then my party was among the founding idea. In fact, my party was the founding idea of this federation process as a second step to Nkrumah at the 60s. Do we go ahead and push for one Africa? Do we push for East Africa? Do we push for regional federation step by step? So we're the founders of this idea, not only for this region, but across the continent. So we're completely committed to it. But federation does not mean dictatorship. Federation does not mean and should not mean one family. Federation does not mean permanent imposters. Federation should mean a federation of states that come in democratically. There's a conversation amongst countries, and people come in freely and gather together. And that federation, if then it comes with one leader, that leader is one who's freely, democratically and popularly elected by the citizens of this region, and should not be an imposter, should not be a reject from particular country, should be people who actually have the stature and the commitment to take these people, our region, forward. And actually the East African leader should be somebody who's got something to give to East Africa and therefore the whole of African continent.
So do you think that President Museveni...
That said, on the other question, on what Museveni has done, it's extraordinary you say that. What stability has Museveni brought into this East Africa? Museveni is the guy who attacked and invaded Rwanda. Museveni is the one who attacked and invaded Congo twice. Museveni is the one who attacked and invaded Congo. Museveni is the one who attacked and invaded Kenya. Museveni is the one who is now alleged to have contributed to the political instability in Kenya. Museveni is the one in whose own country 20 years of torture and war in northern and eastern Uganda. What stability has Museveni bring to Uganda, East Africa? So what good lessons should we learn from Mr. Museveni?
But
as far as this is concerned?
Our military missions are in South Sudan, DRC Congo, and many other countries within the region. Isn't that us contributing towards stability of the region? But also, the UPC government, under which you saw Uganda plunder resources in Congo.
That is false, actually.
It is true.
No, it's false. Uganda never plundered resources in Congo. Uganda supported rebels of the Lumumba's forces in Congo, for which you should be proud to associate with, what UPC government did, what they want, Amin, who was responsible for these operations, went as an individual, unlike these NRA guys for whom we're now paying, No. Amin as an individual got involved in oil, in gold deals in Congo, timber, in activities. Parliament investigated Amin. Amin was going to be arrested. In fact, they proposed the planned arrest of Amin for Congo. And
Obote protected him.
No.
From all that.
No, let me tell you this thing, because you don't know, and I know this, and I'm an authority on this thing. No, it's because Obote was coming back to arrest Amin that the Israelis told Amin that we can help you save your neck. So actually, Amin was helped to take over government in order to protect him from the arrest and detention of Obote. You can't compare that with what the Musevenis and NRA guys have done in Congo, for which now we've got a bill of how many billion shillings, is it trillion shillings, for exploitation in individuals. So you can't compare that,
Retired Major
No,
So many concerns.
on the question of President Museveni being called the father of East Africa, I find it so interesting and nice. And especially coming from a sovereign head of state and in his country. If it had occurred that this pronouncement was made in Pollar, you'd think it is a political niceties. The man was in Uganda, so he had to talk something sweet.
Yes, he made
But-
it in Kolo.
For the second time.
For a second time.
Yes.
It
The
did
first time
first
was
in
Kenya.
Nairobi.
Yeah.
You did know?
No,
You're
I knew,
sleeping.
but I was also here campaigning before that.
No,
Used to come
he did it
campaigning
in Nairobi.
Nairobi first.
When he
I
was
know,
being
during
sworn in.
swearing
When he's swearing in.
Yes, when he was being sworn in. In fact, we didn't even hear the one of Kololo because the one of
You were
Nairobi was
sleeping.
enough. The one of Nairobi was enough. So here is a foreign head of state, the fountain of honor of a powerful economically and otherwise Kenya, making a pronouncement in his own land without any subject to fear and intimidation. This speaks volumes for the achievement of President Museveni. Now, the mere fact that he has been stable in power for long gives seniority. That one, there's no doubt. Even among presidents, presidents are all sovereign. But if you elected 3 years ago in your sovereign country, and I am elected today, for sure you are my senior. That one is one. Two,
So
the
can
peace
we say
process
that
in Burundi,
can we say
yes.
can we say that can we say that can we say that
yes, I'm listening.
can we say that Joe Biden is in fact junior to President Museveni?
Yes. It is.
Because he has-
junior.
Okay.
It's junior. And how else would you measure seniority? By the size of the economy. You can't measure seniority by the size of the economy with a sovereign country. So now, we have had President Museveni contributing very much in the peace in Burundi. Mandela was in for it. They left it to a president of Tanzania, but eventually the whole peace deal was handed over to Museveni. Burundi is peaceful. Okay? The East African community, the development of its infrastructure, including a formidable parliament, which will periodically elect members, has been because Museveni has been in the center of it. Laws there too, the charter, the other legislations under, has been seen over by Museveni. The bringing of other members, Museveni has been the strong advocate to say, ladies and gentlemen, united we stand, together we fall. Rwanda was brought in, Burundi was brought in, South Sudan was brought in, Congo was brought in.
Should we expect
this was really because of Museveni? Doesn't he deserve?
So we need to reward him.
Doesn't he deserve that title? Somebody who has worked so hard in good faith to achieve such an institution. So I am gratified that the pronouncement comes from a sovereign head of state in his own land, without fear of intimidation, without fear of flattery because he's outside or he's in Uganda. From the bottom of his mutima, he said it. So Museveni deserves it.
Yes. Then secondly, how about your response towards what Dr. Sarah was saying, that there is
Removal of term limits.
that there
and the
is a
Islamic
move to remove term limits?
You see, what Sarah is saying almost borders discussing rumors.
Not at all.
The borders discussing rumors. And I don't think we are so blessed to discuss innuendos, rumors and imaginations and speculations. This forum should discuss evidence-based matters. If it is a matter within speculation, innuendos, imaginations and wishes, I think we could restrain it for now.
All
Do
right.
we have let me ask Afande. Afande, do we have a draft protocol on governance?
I have not looked at it.
You haven't?
Of course, you are sleeping. We have had a draft protocol on governance. It's coming to 20 years. It has never been passed because of one clause, term limits.
Okay.
And it's in the way for the political federation.
But
It cannot
You
be.
have to say it is because of that.
I know, I've been part of those, I follow debates.
So it is your
I follow
feelings.
debates
It is
at
your
the East
feelings.
African community
Where was the
level.
debate?
East African community. Who passes protocols? EAC
So your
protocols.
shirt is on the
Who
answered and the answered.
passes?
Your shirt is on
Please
the
stop
answered and the
sleeping.
answer says it is because of the.
You can do yourself a favor by telling the audience that you do not follow what happens in Arusha. I think that can solve it.
No.
Which would be very interesting considering that you're
Sarah
director for
is-
external services.
if
Go
Sarah
to the protocol
If
and
Sarah
see
says
why
that
it has
there's such
been.
an answered, which is a record of parliament,
Of course.
which says that we have stayed, or there was debate to the effect that we are staying this because the position of Uganda is saying this.
Even
We
Uganda
have
has been
a
a
weekly
champions.
debate. She can produce it next time. We have a weekly
Yeah,
debate.
sure.
She
I
can
think-
produce
But you do
such
not
an
follow what
answer.
happens
We
in
shall-
Arusha.
we shall try
That
to bear that
protocol
evidence.
what happened when Shiraso, our own, was the Deputy Secretary General for Political Affairs. So we even had our own at the community championing that protocol. So if Afande does not follow anything beyond Uganda, it's understandable. These people are very busy trying to
No,
create
I do follow.
legitimacy
I'm the
for
But he
director
said
for
several times he
external
doesn't know
affairs.
he'll change.
Yeah.
On this one today is very particular.
I'm director for external affairs. I follow this, and that is why I'm
Then
saying
follow the work under
you can
Shiraso and
produce this.
pending
We have
protocols.
weekly interface.
You
can
will
bring
do
the
this.
I
answer.
will not produce, go and do
You
research.
can do research. And
What kind of external relations do you do?
You see, she can produce.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Ochieno, just sticking to the East African community, we have examined how Uganda relates with Kenya. Fair enough. But let's talk about Rwanda just for a bit. We had hoped, or Ugandans along the Katuna border had hoped that by now that the border would be open and there would be free movement of goods and services and people. But I think the border remains closed. And as of last week, we saw a Uganda
Is the
delegation.
border still closed?
I am not sure it is.
No, no.
What extent will tell us?
I am not sure it is open. From what I gather from colleagues is that the border remains closed.
Where do people pass?
I don't know. Perhaps he could clarify on
for
that.
us.
Yeah.
Comrade Awich.
No,
Because why I'm asking is that
Sure.
we saw Uganda having a delegation visit Kigali.
By air. Airspace had never been closed.
No. My point is the purpose of the mission, the purpose of the visit. We saw General Muhoozi and and a group of others.
Who were the others?
Andrew Mwenda and the rest. So my question is, had they gone to maybe address some of the issues we are having with Rwanda?
I think it was a personal visit,
It was a
which
personal
I
visit?
suggest that we leave. Because even when we are discussing the unpalatable tweet, it said really it's a personal visit.
It's a personal visit.
Yeah, so I think really if it's a personal visit by an official, all those members of the delegation, 99% were not officials
very interesting
of
private
government.
citizens.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to wrap it up.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But in context, and it will not really harm anything. But actually, Uganda-Rwanda relations is not a matter between Rwanda, Gatuna, and Katuna. It's not a matter between Rwanda and Kabale, Kigezi. It's a matter between these two East African countries, and as Sarah says, we are one people. I have relatives who are Banyarwanda, and I have relatives who are the other end of the world in Rwanda, and I have relatives in Tororo with direct blood in terms of linkages of people. And for us to be discussing the East African community within this context, and that's why Sarah's point, which, Comrade, which you must do us a favor on the record, go and investigate, because it's a very serious issue. Because we want a Uganda which is for the future 60 years, but we want a Uganda with the next 60 years will be a net positive contributor to East African region, and I hope in the 60 years we shall have one Republic of Africa in which our founding parents had hope and possibility, so that the children of Gatarama and children of Chinoni are one people. So really, whatever happened, as we're living it here, the relations between these two countries should not, or any of these two countries should not necessarily be about possibilities of people in the border. It should not even be about trade, but about peoples. It should be about more than that. And so therefore, whatever happens where the people in politics, responsible positions, our leaders and treaters and everyone else when they're having these conversations, they should know, and that's why maybe when they apologize, they should also apologize to us, the citizens. You know, we are a people in this world in which we need peaceful coexistence. People should know that in positions of leadership, whatever they do it in the interest of all the peoples of East Africa, not only people in local borders of Malaba or indeed particular sub-regions.
All right, fair enough. Our time is fast spent and we need to be out of here. So I'll just pick your last words regarding this topic. I'll begin with you, Joseph, as I come towards retired Major.
Maybe I can only repeat what I said earlier, that Mr. Museveni's speech, or rather interview, exposed what I've always confirmed, that he'll mum around his way. This guy has got his agenda and he's been pushing his agenda, and somehow people are buying it slowly. But something that I think I had omitted to say was is that since it's about commentaries, people said on social media, people were quite excited by the young presenter, that she was calm, of course, those kind of discussions. But because she was a woman, I need to say this, Moses, that I watched bits of it, because I normally don't spend time to watch Museveni. I saw bits of it, and if you look at it in detail, you realize that this is a calm, ladly presenter. And because you're a fantastic young presenter yourself, maybe there are lessons of art of doing these things. And sort of very interesting, without prejudice to gender, I actually thought that I don't know which other male journalist would not have been upper in tone. Not necessarily that it matters, but it's something that I was just thinking as I was looking through a review of these things. So actually credit to our women folks, girl power, that actually when it comes to some of these things to do with public services and leadership, which is some of the conversations which is taking place, we should take very seriously that as we are looking at Museveni's 36 years, I look back to UPC's previous 12 in terms of investment in education, and particularly focusing on communities to enable a culture to go into school. So be it that East Africa, we have one in which whatever happens, if there's a United East Africa, there's a focus for which there is parity for positions in public services, but the possibility that maybe the first president of East Africa is a woman, and I can't wait for the next president of Uganda who would be a UPC, but UPC as a woman.
All right, thank you. Yes, Doctor, your last words.
Well, I think we have to give credit to President Museveni for exceedingly mastering the Machiavellian style of leadership. He can manipulate anybody in his way. He can sign any kind of MOUs to cross one bridge and wait for another. He can do anything to stay in power. But my message to the East Africans, please reject Uganda's bad influence in your countries. Reject a move to remove term limits at the East African community, which will remove term limits in your countries, and you will fall into our trap of getting stuck with bad leaders for such a long time. Reject that move.
Retired Major.
My comment and my conclusion is that it was good for President Museveni to accept that interview, which was done in a calm and a serene atmosphere. I think now the Kenyan interviewer knows that our president is not a bully. He talks like a father, he listens to you, and he explains things in its historical perspective. And that is why when he mentioned about the 24 years regress, it is within public domain, only that it omits our memory, that as early or as late as 1986, you had to write an application to buy goods, sugar, salt, and the rest.
Because of the war.
But right now,
because of the war,
as opposed to regress, you really need to advertise strongly, including this water, to get market. Meaning that the goods and services is so available that the biggest task now is to accept to be bought, including salt, including sugar. It wasn't the case. So I am very happy about the interview, and it also give a clear view about his projection, his feelings about East Africa. So things that some of us cadres would explain, the president has explained it. So I'm happy about the interview, and I'm grateful for it.
All right, we're also happy that you've spared the time to be on our show this afternoon. And thank you very much, Mr. Joseph. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah and retired Major Awich. Thank you for sparing the time to be on the Citizens Chat Show. Well, have a lovely Friday to all our viewers. This brings us to the end of this conversation. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.